Organ harvesting came to prominence in the last 4 decades. It's the sale and purchase of human organs for transplantation and one of the most global crimes perpetrated by humans at the moment. Now, the organ most transplanted by people is the kidney. The illegal sale of kidneys in the world today is a global practice, albeit criminal in most cases. Demand for organs for transplantation is greater than supply, and there are thousands of people in need of organs but are still on the waiting list. While organ harvesting may save lives, in some cases, the absence of regulations means many have been abducted, trafficked, killed sometimes in the process. A former Deputy Senate President and his wife were recently charged to court by the Metropolitan Police in the UK over allegations of organ trafficking in Nigeria. In Nigeria, the rules are unclear, the laws are fuzzy, and are exploited to grow this illicit trade. What do we know about this organ harvesting question? That's why we're here on The Square. Welcome, I'm Sulaiman. In June, former Deputy Senate President of Nigeria, Ejike and his wife were charged to the Oxbridge Magistrates Court for an alleged involvement in human trafficking for the purpose of organ trafficking. This news soon gained global attention and brought to the fore the discourse about the organ harvesting and trafficking business in Nigeria. The National Health Act 2011 signed by President Goodluck Jonathan in 2014, is the law that guides the medical legal practice in Nigeria, but its popularity has been questioned by many. There are also sections of the Act that have called for questioning, especially as it concerns the issues of organ harvesting and trafficking. Some of these sections are unclear and are believed by subject experts to provide a clear leeway for organ traffickers in Nigeria. Medical doctors and legal practitioners have called for the repeal of these sections, including sections 48 and 51 of the National Health Act of 2014 in Nigeria. Section 48(1)(b) of the Act says a person shall not remove tissue, blood, or blood products from the body of another living person, except that the consent clause may be waived for medical investigations and treatment in emergency cases. Several subsections of Section 48 and 51 have been interpreted and have proven to aid illegal organ harvesting in Nigeria. We'll be analyzing the Senator Ejike's situation and also the medical, legal, and social implications of this practice, and also even for the constituents of the senator who's not at the moment representing his people. So joining me is Professor Phillip Njemanze. He's of the global Prolife Alliance. We also have Ejike Okpa. He's a global affairs analyst. He joins me from Texas, and Liborous Oshoma is making it live to our studios today. Gentlemen, thanks for your time. Let's first of all start by saying congratulations to Liborous Oshoma and every lawyer in Nigeria. Is the NBA, and quickly, Liborous, let us in on what is going on with the lawyers.
Yes, it's the National Conference of the Nigerian Bar Association, and the theme for this year is a bold transition. And indeed, the Olumide Akpata-led NBA National Executive has indeed taken the CEA's annual General Conference to another level. They've made a bold statement with this year's conference, and today, after the opening, and Njemanze Aledeh, was a keynote speaker, and she was awesome. Talked about disruptions and disrupting the status quo, and in most cases, those things we term as disruptive are actually those things that tend to correct.
I'm happy. I'm happy.
And lastly, quickly,
yeah, go
quickly, then you had some, selected presidential candidates of SDP, ADC, the APGA, the PDP, the Labour Party, and then the presidential candidate of the APC was represented by the running mate. They all had about, cumulatively, let's say 1 hour.
Well, I'm happy that's happening, and I'll tell you why. And I'm also happy that Ejike Okpa is here, because Ejike had said something about the lawyers. He said, look, NBA should do more. They should disrupt the system. They should send a bill on behalf of the people and see that this does work. Let's start by asking Professor Njemanze. Good to see you, Professor Njemanze, and thanks for your time. You've been on this. This is an issue that has become one of Nigeria's leading problems, and there are medical practitioners involved. Let us in on the proper definition: organ harvesting, organ poaching. For the ordinary African watching, how would you describe this?
Well, yes, the correct terminology for obtaining organs without consent is organ poaching. Organ harvesting itself is the practice of taking an organ from someone, presumably with consent. So the poaching aspect is the criminal aspect of it. But the press has not differentiated this. And what we are actually talking about is organ poaching, the practice of taking organs from people without their consent.
And when we say without their consent, we've had the National Health Act, which is barely followed by most health establishments and practitioners in the country. We've also seen you in the National Assembly push for that, even though you're not a lawyer, you have a sense of what that means. And take us through the journey so far of ensuring that some of those bad practices are taken out of the books.
Yes, you had made a reference to Section 51. The Section 51 authorizes the medical practitioner, and I said the medical practitioner is the one who authorizes that an organ should be taken from a donor patient. So that means it is the practitioner or the medical administrator who is the one that authorizes that organ transplantation should take place, taking an organ from someone for transplantation to another person. Now the Section 48, which they claim gives consent, is also elusive, because they say the consent clause could be waived in medical emergency. What we do in the hospital could be classified basically as medical emergency, because even a simple headache can be classified as medical emergency, both from the patient's point of view or from the doctor's point of view, if he feels that it's a symptom of even a greater problem. So I think what they did in the National Health Act is basically to allow anybody's organ to be taken with the authorization given by the doctor, not the patient, not the donor. The donor has no right over his or her own organ. And when they say emergency, the donor is a healthy person. So there is no sort of emergency with relationship to the donor. So there is no place to put that clause that in case of emergency to whom? Because the donor who has come, you are trying to recruit, is perfectly healthy. If he was not healthy, he cannot be a donor. So this was a trick. And we know for sure that this was headed by an international organ trafficking cartel. they funded the National Assembly. Some people estimate to the tune of 6.2 billion US dollars. They also bought all the Nigerian government, federal government hospitals at the cost of 3.2 billion US dollars. They even offered to buy all the Catholic hospitals for $2 billion, but the bishops refused that. So this is a well-organized cartel who are actually moving into Nigeria in order to actually buy up, or they have already paid an advance on all our organs. Anybody in the Federal Republic of Nigeria has no entitlement to their organs as it stands today with the law. And we know this for sure, that these are billionaires from the United States who funded this organ trafficking cartel to take the organs of Nigerians.
All right,
and that's the situation
I'll come
today.
back to you, Professor Njemanze, so you can expatiate and clarify, because these are very weighty statements or allegations. If you say there are international organ trafficking cartel, and you've also reeled out some, amount of money that has been pumped into this. But let me welcome Ejike Okpa. Ejike, thanks for your time, and thanks for all us having time to look at issues around the continent. Quickly here, we're not jumping into the legal matters now, Ejike. Make a sense for us. First, when the news hit the international scene, you're based in the United States, that a serving Nigerian senator is already been arrested in the UK on account of organ harvesting. I will want to go with Professor Njemanze, poaching, but in this case, we'll leave it at that. How did that news come to you?
Thank you for having me on the show, and nice to meet the other guest. You're talking about organ, harvesting or poaching. Let's go back to at the time. I don't know whether you remember the Otokoto issue in Owerri, where that particular facility was brought down because it came to light that that was what they were doing, whether you call it harvesting or poaching. This was back in the 90s, when one naked Navy guy or somebody was the military governor administrator. So this thing has been going on in Nigeria. I'm happy to hear that there's a law in Nigeria, but you have to remember law is geographic, even though they say, international. In Texas, for instance, on my driver's license, they will ask you the question, do you want to donate your organ? You have to, you have to do that. So that if there's an emergency, then, if somebody dies in the process, then they've already indicated their willingness for their organ to be harvested. I'm so sort of shocked that Njemanze said that in Nigeria, for in case of emergency, they can grab somebody. That if that is a law, that the Nigerian Bar Association has to get on a public service law and have that part, that particular clause removed, because you have to get the consent of the donor. If the donor is underage, then you have to get the consent of the parents. So we have to be very clear on that. If not, then what's going to happen is people can be grabbed because somebody feels there's an emergency to donate an organ. And then you have to also screen the person who is giving you the organ to make sure that it matches. This is not like getting a spare tire from the trunk of your car and putting it on. No, organ donation takes a whole lot of processes in order to make sure that the recipient, is going to be suitable for it. If not, there's going to be rejection, and there may be some other health issues. But back to the case of Ekweremadu, I happen to come from the the senatorial district where he represents Enugu West. You have UNTH at that location. The Ekweremadu thing is shocking in the sense that, he didn't get a Nigerian medical doctor to have, done the pre-screening and then now said, hey, with our facilities here are not able to do this. Maybe he has a candidate. Then he will make a recommendation to the UK doctor, whomever is going to do that there. But instead, no. The allegation is that he got somebody to go to UK, and then when they get to UK, then whatever is going to happen is going to happen. That's a violation. Because Nigerian Nigerian health law does not have a reciprocity or correspondence with the UK law. So again, this is where the lawyers come in, and this is where we have to understand that once you start crossing international borders, the laws get very specific, except if the two countries have some sort of reciprocity or understanding. The idea of a cartel buying Nigerian hospitals, I think that's as bogus as anything can be. Because if there's a cartel doing that, mention the cartel, mention when the offer was made, and mention what the commodity is going to be in exchange. Again, this is where the Nigerian Bar Association will have to come in on behalf of Nigeria and question some of these things. So again, let's talk about the challenges that Ekweremadu is going to be facing based on this one singular act. Because, as a senator of Nigeria, he didn't go to UK on an official capacity. He went there on a private matter. And, there are, stories about his own child, needing the organ. Fine, everybody can need an organ, but you should not, because of your own personal need, violate any law. And that's why the Nigerian, High Commission in UK is not extending him any legal services. And I hope this becomes a lesson and also becomes something that the Nigerian Bar Association can look upon as a case study, and then go back and begin to advise the National Assembly on aspects of the law on health that may have to be revised or set aside.
All right, okay, Ejike, I'll come back to you. And, two key things, gentlemen, we've opened up here. And we're talking about sudden disappearances of people. You've brought up again the Otokoto, yes, which happened in the early 90s. We'll look at that. We'll come back to Dr. Njemanze. Let's bring in Liborous. And Liborous, there are sections of the Nigerian legal and medical professions who have said Senator Ekweremadu hasn't done anything wrong. And if this holds true in Nigeria, what's the practice abroad?
Yeah, but first and foremost, quickly, let me correct some wrong impressions and assertions made by my co-panelists. This has purely nothing to do with the Nigerian Bar Association. It's not a Nigerian Bar Association thing, no. The National Health Act, there is a lacuna, what we call a lacuna in law. If you look at section 52 that the professor cited, there ought to be a section before section 52. Section 52 is strictly talking about who can. It's like, let me use the everyday man's language, who can perform an operation and where an operation can be performed. Ordinarily, he now goes further down to talk about donations in section 53, and section 55 talks about donations in will. Section 53, that you shall not get monetary compensations for donations made. So the presumption ordinarily is that there ought to be a donation, but which is why I said there ought to be a section 51 that will talk about donation, consent. I agree with that. Consent to donate, and that you're donating before you begin to talk about where the operations should be performed and who can authorize. It is not that the law is saying that anybody, the medical doctor, can just take anybody to the theater and transplant the person's organ. No, that is not what the law is saying. Then secondly, on the case of Senator Ekweremadu, the law here is different from the law in UK. Even if he has contracted a Nigerian doctor in UK before, and that doctor did not report to the appropriate authority, I tell you that doctor by now probably would have been in trouble, because by virtue of the organ transplant, the United Kingdom Organ Transplant Act, it prohibits, it was a law made that came into force on the 1st of April 1989 to prohibit the Sideru, where the rich Britons were taking advantage of poor Turkish children, who were induced monetarily to donate organs. And so they were induced monetarily, and then they come donate their organ. And so to curb that menace, the Human Organ Transplant Act of 1989 was enacted by the British Parliament, prohibiting donation of organs to anybody who is not related. Yes, who is not. Wait, I'm coming. I'll take it. I'll break it down further, because there is an amendment to it, and so as at that time it became an offense if you donate organ to somebody or you procure an organ from somebody who is not related to you. But with the high demand and the fact that people ordinarily will want to donate, so there was an amendment to that law called the Ultra Related Transplant Act. And so what that did was that if you are not, that you can only donate organs to people who are, only blood relations can, you can donate organs to anybody provided there are no pecuniary gain or any form of inducement. In the case of Ekweremadu, why it raised an alarm was the fact that here you have a sitting member of parliament in Nigeria writing a letter, requesting for visa to procure an organ for a daughter from somebody. So definitely, in a land where it is prohibited, that first and foremost, the person should be a blood relation. And if it's not a blood relation, it must not be for pecuniary gain or any form of inducement. So they had to investigate to ensure that there was no inducement, there was no pecuniary gain from the donor, from the donee to the donor. So that's what the UK government is investigating. But here, the law simply just says by section 53 that you cannot donate blood or organs for pecuniary gain, provided the pecuniary gain is not for, what do you call it? There's a word it used, to maybe replenish lost blood or whatever. Let me put it that way. So that's the difference here. So, but I agree that there's need for the medical association. That's why I told you it's not the MBA thing. The medical association to sit down and say, look, this is a practice worldwide. And so to bring our laws or to suggest, ways or international best practices to say there is need for an amendment. So everything it shouldn't be about MBA.
But again, it doesn't look like too much of an asking for national issues for the MBA to collaborate with the NMA, the Nigerian Medical Association, because it is you who just saw that there is a lacuna, there's a loophole there.
Yeah.
So perhaps if the lawyers had come, and that's what Professor Njemanze has been doing all by himself. Now let's come back to him. I'll come back to that. I'll let you respond to that. Professor Njemanze, I remember at that point in time when you went for that particular sitting, Nigerians had the privilege of having 2 or 3 medical doctors in the Senate. Notably, Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa was there, who's today the governor of Delta State. And of course, Dr. Chris Ejike, who is the minister for labor, he was also there. So how difficult was it for you to convince your colleague doctors to see the loopholes in all of this to save lives?
Yes, actually, I was representing the Catholic Medical Practitioners of Nigeria and the Association of General and Private Medical Practitioners of Nigeria as the committee chairman of the National Health Act. And presiding over this National Health Act public hearing was Senator Ike Ekweremadu, who was then the Deputy Senate President. And
let me comment there. Who did you say was presiding?
Well, Senator Ike Ekweremadu, he was the presiding senator for the bill public hearing. And the sponsor, the chief sponsor was Ifeanyi Okowa, now governor, but then Senator Ifeanyi Okowa. And just sitting by his side was also Dr. Chris Ejike, so who was then a senator. So all of them were there. And I made this argument directly pointing out Section 48 that Section 48 makes an exemption that is impossible. You don't exempt. There is no situation in medicine where you can overrule or say the consent is waived. Consent is never waived. It could be transferred to the next of kin, but it's never waived in any situation. That is part of the Helsinki Declaration. So it's an international treaty. So we cannot make an exemption here in Nigeria. Then I also pointed out the loophole in Section 51. You cannot have the medical practitioner or the medical director of a hospital be the one to authorize that an organ is taken from someone to be given to another person. So it is wrong. You can't give what you don't have. That's a legal principle. Then I pointed out in Section 53 that it is also when you say reasonable cost for reimbursement of reasonable payments. What does that mean? Is 10 million naira reasonable payment for kidney? Some people will tell you that too. So you actually legalized the sale of organs in Section 53. Now, my colleague Ejike had asked whether I was there when this cartel made the negotiation. The answer is yes, I was physically present in a deliberation. We were called as leaders of the private health sector to the headquarters of General Electric, the biggest company in the world, the leading medical company in the world. And we were told that Bill Gates offered them $2 billion to build 260 hospitals in Nigeria. So they want us to name our price so that we can be paid off, so we will leave the entire medical system, so that we will not be practicing medicine, we will not be practicing pharmacy, we will not be practicing laboratory science. In Nigeria, no Nigerian will be in the medical profession. And we should just name our price so we will be compensated for. We couldn't believe ourselves.
Why would anyone do a thing like that?
This was done. I was present. It's not somebody told me. I was physically present before the executives of a General Electric with a number of other Nigerians in the health sector, in pharmacy, in laboratory sciences, and there were executives of GE from their headquarters in New York, also present by teleconference.
That's okay. No one is in doubt, but I'm asking, there must be a reason, because no one would want to see the entire human race wiped out. So why was there a need for all medical professionals to stand down?
Yeah, what they wanted to do was that they wanted to take over the health system. That means they will build their so-called ultra hospitals, which we believe their sole purpose will be that most Nigerian organs will be harvested, because you've made the law. You have authorized that every Nigerian is an involuntary donor. That's what you have done with the law. So once you have proclaimed it, this is the first time it's happening in the history of humanity. Nothing like this has ever happened. And I warned Ike Ekweremadu before the Senate, and Nigerians there will bear me witness, and many of them still remember. I told Ike Ekweremadu before the entire public hearing that he will be the first victim of this law he's standing for. Before everybody. Senator Kowa can also bear me witness because he was there. And I told him, it now seems like a prophecy come true. And this was exactly what happened. That the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria sold the entire organs of the Nigerian people, even when they knew that this was the situation. And that is very, very, very bad on us as a whole nation. And we regret that.
It's amazing and shocking, mind-boggling, to say the least, Professor Njemanze, to think that that's the whole idea and no one else has actually taken that up. Well, let me quickly bring in Ejike Okpa. Ejike, you can see it for the first time in a long time, and Anko is almost speechless to hear such, since he said he was physically present. But again, now let's dig in deep more, because if we look at the sections of that National Health Act in Nigeria, it doesn't actually protect the donor, so to speak, because it's really fuzzy, to say the least. But if and truly there is, as we have seen, it's also highlighted by Liborous, that there is a gap in that act. What should the people be doing, especially since we practice a representative democracy in Nigeria? Ejike.
Well, thank you, and in fact, thank you, Professor Njemanze, for the clarification. And you know, when I brought in injected MBA, the reason for bringing them in is because they are the Bar Association of Nigeria. You know, they should be looking at any law that affects, you know, Nigerians in totality. You know, that's what they call the public aspect. You can become friends of the court. You can actually write a review on a particular law, and either before it is signed into law, so that the president, if they want to veto it, they can use the arguments coming from legal minds to do it. You know, law is simply, you know, nothing other than, you know, a group of people coming together and say, this is what we want to see happen. And then the duty of the lawyers, you know, in most cases, is to make sure there's a legal language, so that if such a thing goes to court, it can be defended, you know, it can be defended, or there's a grounds for its defense. So then, you know, the two things going on here is, you know, you have Nigeria, the organ and laws going on, and then the UK. A matter has crossed the line. So now, you know, if he goes to trial, the question is going to be, in what law is he going to be tried on? It's not going to be tried under the Nigerian law. And anybody thinking that's going to be the case is obviously doesn't know how law operates. But what needs to happen for the Nigerian sake is the legal professional people, I mean, and then the healthcare professional people have to be very, very cognizant of what organ donation is. It doesn't matter if anybody comes from outside the country, wants them to do a particular thing. If those particular things are not legal, remember one of the basic definitions of law: if an act is illegal, it can never be, it becomes voidable. You know, it becomes void, not voidable. So if anybody's coming in there and trying to tell them, oh, you know, we're going to build your hospitals because now you become a feeder system in order for them to get access to your thing, that in itself is illegal, and there's no justification for it. And I think there should be a follow-up now that Professor Njemanze has said he testified. I wonder if there was any document, any proposal set, because if this is the case, then the Nigerians, you know, SAN, for those of people who consider themselves SAN, you know, to me, which is senseless advocates of Nigeria, because they usually don't do anything for Nigeria. They should go after this institution. They should go after GE. They should go after Bill Gates Foundation for them to have even come to Nigeria to propose such a thing. The world needs to know those things. That is where the lawyers come to play. It's not just going into court to look for transaction cases. No, this is something that affects humanity. Maybe they will set an example with these organizations who think are going to go to developing countries because they are poor, they are desperate. We're going to do something and take advantage of them. I hope Professor Njemanze can assist in that endeavor, because if he testified, obviously there's a record of that testimony in the Senate. So now the Friends of Nigeria, which can be anybody, should go and access those documents and make a case of it. You know, organ donor is a big challenge in America. We do, you know, blood donation. Before you do blood donation, I haven't heard anybody talk about screening. You have to screen even for diseases, because, you know, if you have a certain disease, you don't want to transfer it by donating an organ. All of those things are, you know, that's the science behind organ donation. Now, the law becomes something that is geographic too. Of course, you may have international conferences or paper that say this is how you do it, but you still have to tailor it to suit the national interests of a particular people.
And before I let you, before I come to Liborous, let's talk more on this, Ejike. I'll let Liborous, I'll let you react to some of the key things he said. And quickly here, this has to do, you talked about the issue of organ donor also in the United States and other parts. You know, the reason this practice has grown in some places, like on the continent, Africa and Nigeria, is the presence of a global and local market. You mentioned some of the crime cases like what happened in east of Nigeria back in the mid-90s. What do you think the people should be looking into? Because now some cases of kidnappings, and which some people never seen, does this also relate to what Nigeria is dealing with at this point in time? Because the Otokoto you mentioned struck a chord. It looks like a business that has been there without people putting a finger as the main reason why that has been.
Well, look, organ is an important aspect of human being. In America we have those people are looking for it, but there's got to be a chain of command. There's got to be, okay, who is donating the organ? Where is it coming from? All of those things is the logistics in that whole process. Somebody is buying it. Of course, there's the underworld market for organ, and they go to poor countries where, again, financial inducement or desperation makes them do certain things. So what the law has to say, again, is that, if a Nigerian were to donate organ, which again includes even blood, there's got to be a trace of that. Who is receiving it? Where is it going? So that logistics should be in place. And again, the Nigerian politicians and public interest folks needs to begin to speak up about some of these things that go on, because it's a huge market. And people are coming from developed countries because, they figured, hey, people in the poor countries obviously have less value about life, so they are willing to do certain things. No, that's not the case. If you want to donate, make it a law, make it a paper, you go sign up for it. And so if something happens to the person, they can say, hey, they've already committed to donating their organ. Then who harvests the organ? Is it a teaching hospital? Is it a certain medical people? You have to be specific as to who gets access to this. And once they get it, then that becomes a chain of command. That is, that organ has to be labeled from the person you get it, when you got it, what was the circumstances of getting the organ, and all these other things. So anybody receiving it, either if through donation or buying it, then know what they are getting, because it's going to go into a human being. And so if you have some illnesses, obviously you may be transferring the same illness to somebody else. That's why the screening part of it is very, very important.
Let me come to the studio, Ejike, and I'll come back later to you, Professor Njemanze, so that you can tell us what needs to be taken out and also put in the National Health Act. Liborous, I see that you disagree with quite a number of things being said, so let's hear you.
First and foremost, it is a practical impossibility for anybody to moot the idea or think that, Nigeria is not Benin Republic. Nigeria is not a country of 10 million persons that you say, look, all the medical practitioners paved the way, and then we're going to import some medical practitioners from somewhere. It's a practical impossibility. As I speak to you now, the lawyers that have gathered in Lagos alone, physical, you have about 13,000. Not to talk of, you have about more than 20,000 lawyers registered for the conference. So it's like somebody telling me that somebody is coming and then they are making some donations. So you're going to settle all lawyers in Nigeria and for them to stop practicing law. You have a school of medicine, medical colleges that are still coming up as we speak. So for me, it's a practical impossibility. It's not something that I even want to begin to consider. That said, secondly, if you let's read Section 48, so that sometimes when we look at these laws, let us also read them in conjunction with other laws vis-a-vis the Constitution. I agree there are lacunas, but not the kind of alarm bells that we're ringing. Section 48(1), subject to the provision of Section 53, a person shall not remove tissue, blood, or blood product from the body of another living person for any purpose except with the informed consent of the person from whom the tissue, blood, or blood product is removed, granted in the prescribed manner. Paragraph B, that the consent may be waived for medical investigation and treatment in emergency cases.
Just as we've seen when you go for malaria tests, so they can waive that.
In emergency cases, in accordance with the prescribed protocol by the appropriate authority, in this case, the medical NMA. In some cases, you have emergency cases where we also know that our emergency cases here are poor, where some persons are rushed from the accident scene to the hospital, and there is nobody, no relation, and you need to prescribe a blood transfusion in such situation. So also, we've had a situation where police abuse the issue, the idea of police report. Somebody has a gunshot wound, because the law says you must, hospitals abuse the issue of police report, because the law says you must produce a police report to show that this is not from, armed robbery or a shootout with the police. But dogmatically, we follow it, and somebody's dying. Rather than prescribe a first aid, before you begin to talk about all of the legal niceties, you say no, because we don't want harassment from the police. So when you put all of this law, I agree. And then lastly, on the issue of laws, I consistently had said, it is not lack of laws that is our problem. If you look at section 53, section 52, section 53, that prohibits donation for monetary gains except for reasonable cause. But here, like I said, it is not lack of laws, but the lack of the willpower to implement even the existing one that we have.
I wanted you to comment on that. Wait a minute, Liborous. I wanted you to comment on that, because Liborous is here, is a lawyer, and the section 48C, 2B is saying a tissue, blood, or a blood product shall not be removed from the body of another living person for the purpose of merchandise, sale, or commercial purpose. Put this in perspective. You and I, we've been blood donors, but when you're in dire straits, that blood is sold out to you.
That's what I'm telling you.
That's what Professor Njemanze is saying. There are some sections.
What I am saying is that it is not, our problem is not lack of laws. You must also take care of poverty in the land. A situation where somebody goes to sell blood, for example, you sell blood. Young people go to clinic, blood bank to sell blood and get financial reward for it after the blood had been screened. In the country today, people go to sell their organs and make money from it. And then in some cases you have situations where police are even called in to settle crisis.
And these are illegal by the act.
And by the act, these are illegal. So we first and foremost need to deal with the issue of poverty, the issue of governance, the issue of the willpower to implement. So otherwise, you can have beautiful laws, and if the willpower to implement them is not there, then you're just going to have paper tigers on your law books. So why people are selling organs in Nigeria to eke out a living, and the government will look the other way. And that is why it was easy for Ekweremadu to look for somebody somewhere, one poor boy from one corner who was willing to sell, allegedly. Because now they got to UK and the boy looked at the environment, looked at the condition, and he says, no, I'm not willing to sell again, but I want to remain here. From what we hear, if that's anything to go by. So these are the challenges, and these are the challenges we should. And some of us who had consistently been speaking up against this thing, and that's why we've consistently pointed accusing fingers at leadership. Because if you know that you have a social cushioning, for example, there are certain things you will not subject yourself to. And what we do in Nigeria, the practice in Nigeria is different. Let me also say this for the purpose of education. Because the National Assembly, in the process of making laws, sometimes during committee stage or during public hearing, it is not everybody that is privileged to critique that law. So what we do in some cases, when some of these laws are passed, is to challenge the applicability of these laws in court. And that's what we call public interest litigation.
And that's what Ejike is saying.
And some of these issues, like I tell people, they are quick to point to Gani. Oh, what are the lawyers doing? And I say, what are you also doing? Will it be forbidden if you hire a lawyer to challenge this law? Go to court and challenge the law. Let the court strike out certain portions of the law. I can't sit down and strike it out. And the purpose, the duration for amending some of this law will even take a longer process than when you approach the court. So, because it's also financial, what a burden, it's involve finances also to challenge some of these laws. So you don't just sit down and say, MBA also, I must give it to them, MBA, the section of public interest law, the section on the various sections on public interest matter are also doing what they need to do because of the rate of poverty in the society. Let the citizens also, especially our brothers and sisters in diaspora, let them also put funds together and hire lawyers in Nigeria to challenge some of these sections in court.
Let me,
because if you're having to wait for a MacArthur Foundation and foreign donors to do these things, they will also dictate the applicabilities of some of these laws.
Ejike, don't worry, I'll come to you. We're closing. I wanted the professor to come in here first, quickly. The issues, because I'm still baffled by that section that says a tissue, blood, or blood product shall not be removed from the body of another living person for the purpose of merchandise, sale, or commercial purposes. And Dr. Njemanze, we've seen people go, for instance, I go donate blood, and freely, same blood is sold to even a poorer person. So help us, what would you want to see taken out of this act?
Yeah, actually, most of the act, apart from a few sections, most of the acts are redundant. And let us take, you have just made mention of the medical practitioner, someone taking over the whole health system. Section 20 of this law allows it that they can close down and actually sack all Nigerian medical practitioners and healthcare workers from the system after 14 days of not settling any dispute. It's in this law. The law itself, in that the section 48 has to be taken out because you cannot, there is nothing like an emergency that waives a consent. It's not possible. You cannot waive a consent. Transplantation is not just like a simple procedure. It takes a whole lot of time, if not days, to prepare for transplantation. So you cannot say because of emergency you will take somebody's organ. I mean, who has the emergency? The donor is healthy.
Let me jump in here because we're really out of time. But for clarity's sake, let me quickly read Section 20 because Section 20 looks like why people always have an issue with the police and say, why would you come on the hospital? Because Section 21 says a healthcare provider, health worker, or health establishment shall not refuse a person emergency medical treatment for any reason. So it's not, perhaps maybe...
That section, the reason why I cited it is that's when you say a medical practitioner shall not refuse anybody in case of emergency, what it means is that what they wanted to achieve is that anybody coming to the hospital will declare an emergency. Once he declares an emergency, he is entitled to that care. But because he declared an emergency, now his organ can be taken without consent. You see how they link the sections. So that section empowers you to receive healthcare free, but at the same time, it now predisposes you to your organ being taken without consent, because that is what is stated in Section 48. So this was prepared by the International Organ Trafficking Cartel. They know what they are doing. You just have to put it together and look at it very well.
Well, as it is, we have actually looked at it in black and white. It still doesn't cohere with that. But again, you are in the practice, and we do hope that you have some other time to have, this with the NMA to have a look at this quickly here, Ejike, and it has to do with governance. Some of the key things we've highlighted here. And now this, Liborous has said that Nigerians should challenge this. But quickly here, as Nigerians are thinking of doing that, here you have a 7th senator in prison in the UK. What does happen to his constituents now that he's absent?
Well, again, that's where the Nigerian law is just as bogus, and the ambiguity, with the laws is just very alarming, because Ekweremadu doesn't even get to know what his chances are until May next year. So by the time you look at it, he would have spent maybe almost a year in detention, and so his constituents are denied that vote. If he were in Texas or if he were in US, when such a thing happens, then the governor of that particular state will appoint a replacement, they may call a special election. I don't know whether Nigeria has that. But the people of Enugu State, the Enugu Senatorial District, the west part of it that he represents, should not be denied opportunity for representation in the National Assembly. I don't know. I don't know whether the law says anything about those sorts of things, but they cannot wait for Ekweremadu. Whatever his situations are, that will have his situations. It's not that he didn't go to London or UK to represent Nigeria. He is strictly on a business, personal interest. So we wish him well, but Nigeria should not suffer. Let me talk about, what the lawyer said about poverty. It has nothing to do with organ donation. In America, people donate, people sell their organ, people sell their blood, but there's a limit. Okay, there's a limit to number of times you can do it. There are people who go and donate their blood for a fee, but you have to, they got to track it how many times you do it, so you cannot frequently do that. Those are the provisions. And then I also don't know whether on the Nigerian driver's license, whether there's a provision for organ donation. Because again, in Texas, in my license, most black people don't like to donate organ. It is purely for the white people. So, but if I show you my license, you see where I checked. If anything happens to me, my organ is available to be donated.
Ejike, you know how to say it. Some Africans say it. I want to go back complete. Let me bring in. let me bring Liborous. I want to go back complete. Don't touch my organs. So let's bring Liborous, who is a lawyer. That's the essence, of having a lawyer here. Let him wrap up, especially Ekweremadu and his constituents. What's the real situation at the moment, Liborous? So that we can quickly get off.
By our laws, if he absent himself from the sitting of the Senate for, I think, 180 days, then Senate President can declare his seat vacant.
So the count is already on.
Yes. So, and the Senate President can declare his seat vacant. Otherwise, he's not be convicted. He's just been standing trial. So he's still, by our law, he's still presumed innocent until, even by the British law, still presumed innocent until proven otherwise. And so that's the provision of the law. And until that 180 days, you can't declare his seat vacant. It is not the governor that does it here. I do not also think in any presidential democracy that the governor of a state has powers to declare a seat vacant when you have the sitting Senate President. But that said, the issue of Section 20, there is nowhere. Let's not unnecessarily raise alarm bells that are not there. And then also, in an American driver's license that you already consented to, if you are in emergency or if anything happens to you, you already consent. We're not ringing alarm bells about those ones. We're talking about an act where you had not consented that says, if somebody's an emergency, we know emergency situations here in Nigeria. I don't need to declare emergency. If I go to hospital and say emergency and they examine me, it's not emergency, nobody will attend to me. you must be in a critical condition where you cannot even give consent before we begin to talk about it. Even in some emergency
out of
cases,
time because
even in some emergency cases, you are abandoned.
Professor Njemanze just told us that sometimes a headache.
It's not an emergency case.
No,
Look,
you do not know what kind of a headache.
We are not medical practitioners, but we visit and patronize.
Okay, let's close with you, Professor Njemanze. If you can help us here in 30 seconds. Headaches. Are there headaches that are emergencies?
Headache is the headache you are saying is just a symptom that could mean that the blood pressure is too high and the vessels are about to break. So it's an emergency. It could be declared as an emergency. It could be also a sign that a vessel has broken already with blood in the brain. So that will come up with a headache too.
I'm happy about today's program. We have all the experts. A headache could be a trigger to some bigger problem, bigger than what you even call an emergency. I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Professor Phillip Njemanze, Ejike Okpa, and Liborous Oshoma. Many thanks to everyone watching from across the continent. I'm Sulaiman. Bye-bye.